This is not speculation. This is not spin. This is confirmed. The first head to roll was Acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner David Rohr. David Rohr is not a nobody. He is a 30-year veteran of the Border Patrol. He served under 3 presidents. He was widely considered, until yesterday, a Trump loyalist. And yet, before sunrise, a courier delivered a 1-sentence termination letter to his home in Virginia. No meeting, no warning, no explanation, just fired. Why? According to leaked Department of Homeland Security memos, Rohr refused a direct order from the White House. That order demanded he retroactively classify the Minneapolis nurse shooting as a counterterrorism operation. Signing that paperwork would have given the federal agent who fired the fatal shot legal immunity. Rohr refused. And for refusing to rewrite reality on paper, he was removed. But as shocking as that is, the second purge is even more dangerous because it breaks the basic rules of American federalism. Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara is gone. Now understand this, a president cannot legally fire a local police chief. That authority does not belong to the White House. So instead, at 7 a.m., the Department of Justice announced it was placing the Minneapolis Police Department under federal receivership, citing a so-called systemic failure to maintain order. The condition of that federal takeover, the immediate resignation of Chief O'Hara. And here's the real reason. Chief O'Hara did the one thing you cannot do in this administration. He told the truth. Late last night, O'Hara released unredacted 911 dispatch logs and ShotSpotter audio. That data proves, conclusively, that federal agents fired first, fired without warning, and fired at an unarmed woman. Those documents directly contradicted the White House narrative. O'Hara exposed the lie, and for that he lost his badge. In this report, we are breaking down how Trump used unprecedented legal maneuvers to seize control of a local police department, how he is exploiting federal vacancy loopholes to install loyalists without Senate approval, and why, right now, the U.S. military is quietly holding emergency meetings to decide whether they will obey the next order. The guardrails are gone. The purges have begun. To understand why Commissioner David Rohr was fired so abruptly, you have to understand the legal trap the White House is now caught in, and why the Minneapolis shooting wasn't just a public relations disaster, but a full-blown legal catastrophe. The shooting of Sarah Jenkins on Tuesday night didn't just shock the country. It exposed federal agents to criminal liability in a way this administration cannot afford. The agent who fired the fatal shot, identified internally as Agent 734, is now facing potential first-degree murder charges from the state of Minnesota. Not administrative discipline, not suspension, prison. The White House has only one escape route. One. They must invoke the Federal Tort Claims Act, the FTCA, and argue that the agent was acting within the scope of his employment during a national security operation. If the incident can be classified as a national security event, the case moves out of state court and into federal court. From there, the Department of Justice can dismiss it, delay it, or shield the agent under federal immunity doctrines. But if this was simply a police action, crowd control, protest response, routine enforcement, then the case stays in Minnesota State Court. And in state court, that agent goes to prison. That is the entire chessboard. On Saturday night, White House counsel drafted a memo declaring the Minneapolis protests a domestic terror insurgency. That memo didn't need a politician's signature. It needed a career law enforcement official, someone with credibility, to legitimize it. They needed David Rohr to sign it. They needed him to swear, on paper, that a crowd of nurses, teachers, and local residents holding signs were enemy combatants. According to multiple sources speaking to the Washington Post, Rohr didn't hesitate. He reportedly threw the memo across his desk and said, "I enforce the border. I don't sign death warrants for American citizens." Rohr understood exactly what they were asking him to do. Signing that memo wouldn't just have been immoral. It would have been perjury. It would have permanently destroyed the credibility of the Border Patrol, and it would have made him personally complicit in covering up a civilian killing. So he said no. Trump didn't just fire him, he humiliated him. The president himself posted the termination letter on Truth Social, accusing Rohr of being weak, low energy, and a deep state saboteur. A man was fired not for disloyalty, but for obeying the law. And while that was happening quietly behind closed doors, the situation in Minneapolis was spiraling into something even more dangerous, a constitutional crisis. What happened next in Minneapolis should alarm every governor, every mayor, and every police chief in this country, because it crosses a line the federal government is not supposed to cross. The 10th Amendment exists for a reason. It protects states and cities from being commandeered by Washington. A president cannot simply fire a mayor. He cannot simply fire a police chief. Local law enforcement does not report to the White House, so the Trump Justice Department went looking for a workaround, and they found one. They invoked the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, a law normally used to reform police departments that show patterns of civil rights abuse. Historically, this law leads to consent decrees, reform plans, oversight agreements. But this time, the DOJ flipped the logic on its head. Instead of accusing the Minneapolis Police Department of using too much force, they accused it of using too little. Their argument was that MPD's refusal to assist federal agents during the unrest constituted a violation of citizens' civil rights, specifically the right to be protected. In other words, by not cracking down harder, the police were allegedly breaking the law. It's a twisted argument, but it was enough. At 2 a.m., the DOJ filed an emergency motion in federal court. A Trump-appointed judge granted a temporary federal receivership almost immediately. Just like that, the Minneapolis Police Department was placed under the control of the U.S. Marshals Service, and the first order issued by the new federal receiver was simple: accept the resignation of Chief Brian O'Hara. But O'Hara didn't go quietly. At 8 a.m., standing on the steps of City Hall, surrounded by officers who are now effectively on strike, O'Hara held a press conference that detonated the administration's narrative. He held up a USB drive. "They want my badge because I wouldn't lie for them," he said. "They said we called for help. We didn't. They said Sarah Jenkins was armed. She wasn't. Here is the proof." Then he handed the drive to the press. What was on it was devastating. Unredacted 911 dispatch audio, ShotSpotter data, radio traffic from MPD commanders screaming in real time, "Who are these guys in camo? Get them out of our sector. They are shooting civilians. Pull back." The local police weren't coordinating with federal agents. They were terrified of them. The chief was purged to silence a witness, but the evidence was already out. And once that evidence hit daylight, the crisis stopped being local. It went national. Now that David Rohr is gone and Chief O'Hara has been forced out, the obvious question becomes, who takes their place? And how fast can the White House lock this down before the courts intervene? This is where things turn dark. Because Trump does not need Senate approval to replace Rohr. Not immediately. The administration is exploiting the Federal Vacancies Reform Act of 1998. On paper, it sounds harmless. It allows the president to temporarily fill a vacant position for up to 210 days. Normally, the deputy steps in. A career professional, continuity, stability. That is not what's happening here. The act also allows the president to appoint any senior agency employee or any Senate-confirmed official from another agency as acting head. That loophole is the entire strategy. Trump is not elevating the deputy commissioner. He is bypassing the professionals entirely. Instead, sources say the White House is preparing to install a hardline loyalist, someone who will sign the memo Rohr refused, someone who will retroactively classify the Minneapolis shooting as a national security event, someone who will give the agent immunity. Names are already circulating. Cable news regulars, former ICE figures who have publicly called for live fire, mass detention, and extreme escalation. Wartime generals in civilian roles. This is how you weaponize the bureaucracy. You remove the people who say that's illegal and replace them with people who say yes, sir. And while those firings were happening, something else was unfolding quietly in the background. The hackers. The group known as Glass House, the same group that leaked body cam footage on Friday, released what they're calling the Sunday Files. This drop focuses on internal communications between the White House and the DHS Command Center during the Minneapolis operation, and what it reveals is chilling. This was not a rogue shooting, it was a doctrinal shift. A classified document titled Operation Gothic Serpent 2, Rules of Engagement, dated January 20th, Inauguration Day, outlines new operational authority for federal rapid response teams. The language is explicit: preemptive neutralization of agitators, kinetic dispersal, authorization of live fire if agents feel encircled, media blackouts, cell signal jamming in operational zones. And in the margins of the document, next to the section on kinetic dispersal, there is a handwritten note. Experts are analyzing the handwriting. The note reads, "Do it. Stop the bleeding. DJT." If that note is authenticated, it changes everything. It means the president personally authorized the rules of engagement that killed a nurse. That makes this no longer a tragedy. It becomes a conspiracy. This is why David Rohr refused to sign. He saw this document. He knew what it meant. And now, so does the world. With the civilian leadership purged, the spotlight now shifts to the last institution standing between presidential orders and outright illegality, the United States military. And this is where the situation becomes truly unstable. General Charles Q. Brown, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is facing an impossible dilemma. The president is legally his commander-in-chief, but the orders now coming out of the White House may be unlawful. Firing on civilians, seizing local police departments, purging civilian oversight at DHS. This is not counterterrorism. This is domestic coercion. Reports are emerging of what senior defense officials are privately calling a quiet stand-down. National Guard units in Minnesota, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. are suddenly reporting readiness issues. Vehicles unavailable, communications problems, personnel out sick. This is not coincidence. This is a soft refusal. The generals are slowing the machine. They are buying time. They are refusing to turn the U.S. military into the president's personal police force. And Trump knows it. That is why he is leaning so heavily on federal tactical units, BORTAC, marshals, rapid response teams, instead of the Army. He knows the military might say no. The agents, especially under a new loyalist leadership, will say yes, which sets up the most dangerous scenario imaginable. Green uniforms versus camouflage uniforms, the military versus federal law enforcement. If they meet on the streets of Minneapolis, who yields? The purge of the Minneapolis police chief has already sent shockwaves through every governor's office in America. If Trump can seize the MPD, he can seize the NYPD. He can seize the LAPD. The concept of home rule collapses overnight. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has now declared a state of emergency, not against protesters, but against the federal government. State troopers have been ordered to secure the perimeter of Minneapolis police precincts. Federal receivers are being physically blocked from entering buildings. This is 1861-level confrontation, state authority versus federal force. Other governors are watching closely. Legal teams are mobilizing. Quiet pledges of mutual aid are being discussed. The United States is fracturing into federal and state factions in real time. Trump claims he is purging the deep state. What he is actually purging are the breaks. Inspectors general, career professionals, police chiefs, border commanders, the people whose job is to say, "Sir, that's illegal." Without them, the car accelerates toward the cliff. Morale inside Border Patrol is collapsing. Agents are quitting. Minneapolis officers are walking off the job. Blue flu. The purge doesn't create control. It creates chaos. And chaos is exactly what the protests are about. There is one final detail from the Glass House leak that should chill everyone listening. A draft document, Form 45L, a reaffirmation of allegiance. It would require senior federal employees to swear loyalty, not to the Constitution, but to the office of the President. The draft exists. It has not been implemented yet. If it is rolled out, the walkouts will be immediate. The CIA, the FBI, the NSA, they will not sign it. The government will hollow out overnight. Trump will be left with acting loyalists, emergency appointees, and a shell of authority. We once thought Nixon's Saturday Night Massacre was the worst abuse of power in modern history. Nixon fired a prosecutor. Trump fired the border chief. He purged a police chief. He seized a city, and he dared the system to stop him. Sarah Jenkins is dead. The truth is public, and no number of firing letters can put it back in the bottle. We are monitoring the Pentagon closely. If General Brown resigns, that is the signal, because when the generals walk away, the republic is no longer stable. This wasn't about cleaning house.
It was about hiding the body. And the whole world is watching. See you tomorrow.